1 Corinthians 13, verse 5, doth not behave itself unseemingly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, and thinketh no evil. Now this verse is right in the middle of the great love chapter. And he's talking about the way you will respond if you have true love in your heart. He talks about the gifts of prophecy and understanding mysteries, had all knowledge, though have all faith, so that I could remove mountains. But notice, if I have not love or charity, if I don't have that, I'm nothing. Now I know truth is very important, and we need to have doctrine and truth taught so that we can be a strong church. But if we don't have love, we don't have anything.
That's right.
Brother Polly was going out the door, and he put his head up to mine, and he said, Brother Tony, I never felt so much love in the church. He said, this church is full of love. Amen. And he complimented the congregation on the way he was treated and the love you showed him. And you know, a person can be a great scholar and know many facts, but if they don't have love that connects it together with the people and with God, then they never ever accomplish much. And they're never, most of those people, they may think that they're a pastor, but they're never called to a church. And they simply don't, they just don't have a connection with their people because there's no love. He goes on to talk about that love suffers long. That means it bears a lot of things. It puts up with a lot of things. It's kind. It vaunteth not itself, and is not puffed up. Love doth not behave itself in a strange manner, unseemingly. It's used when Paul refers to treating your virgin unseemingly, like you were going to take a woman to wife, and you treated her in a strange, unseemingly way, and brought much shame upon her because of that. And so here he says, it does not behave itself unseemingly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked. And now I want you to look at that, thinketh no evil. Now that's a challenge that really goes beyond what we think our ability is in our Christian life, is to think no evil. Now you know, husbands and wives, you love each other, and you've been together for many years, and it is not a good thing for you to think evil of your mate. You know, there are a lot of people that are jealous and suspicious of their mate, and if they're a little bit late from work or something turns up, you know, they're constantly projecting suspicion upon their mate because they think that they've done evil. But he tells us here to think no evil. It doesn't do it. So we want to talk about this mindset that the Bible gives us of as we think, so we are. As we think. A man was driving on a trip, and on the way, his car began to act up. He pulled over on an exit and found a gas station, and then his car quit right in front of the gas station. And there happened to be a mechanic on duty, and the mechanic came out and looked it over, and he said, I know how to fix this one. And the man said, well, please fix it. So he went in and got a hammer and raised the hood, and he hit it with a hammer one time, and then he said, now start it up. And he started it up, and it ran perfect. And, there are some cars that have little quirks in them that were, when they made it, they didn't correct that. And people know how to fix them with just a little bit of knowledge. Man then told him that he owed him $100. And he said, I can't believe you want me to pay you $100. He said, I saw you just take a hammer and hit it on that one spot, and it started. He said, well, I want an itemized bill. So the mechanic went in and he wrote $1 for using the hammer, $99 for knowing where to hit it, and gave him the itemized bill. Automatically people would say, well, that guy was just a ripoff. He charged $100, just hit it with a hammer. But look at all the experience it took for him to gain that knowledge. I've had mechanics, I was ready to put in a whole new air conditioning on my car. It's going to cost me about $1,500. And this mechanic was under there and he was working. He said, I found your problem. He said, every time I push in, the fuse dies. And he said, all I need to do is get a different fuse box. And he fixed it. Never had a problem with it since. My air conditioner's been cold as ice. And I ended up paying like $75. But could have been really rough. So the way we think about things, the way that we take things into our mind is very important. I want you to turn to another verse that I think on a lot and meditate on in Proverbs 23 and verse 7. Proverbs 23, verse 7. The Bible says these words, for as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. Eat and drink, saith he to thee, but his heart is not with thee. We're talking about a worthless, depraved person. Verse 6 says, eat thou not the bread of him that hath an evil eye. Now that Hebrew is translated, the evil eye, a worthless or depraved individual. Neither desire thou his dainty meats or the things that he's figured out in life to, I remember as a young boy, I say this to the boys so you'll learn from this. When I was a young boy, I remember a young man moved from Ohio into our county, and he just knew everything about sin. And he was taking us behind the barn and showing us dirty pictures, and he was teaching us curse words we never heard before. And he only stayed for a year, but during that time there were so many problems that were directly related to him because of his evil, depraved nature, which probably was developed by his dad and mom because he wasn't brought up in a Christian family and taught the truth. Young people, when someone tries to tell you about sin and how to commit sin, don't stay around them. Get away from them. Because that kind of person can introduce you to evil, and you will begin to think evil. You'll start thinking about things that a little boy shouldn't be thinking about at your age. And that is something we should do all we can to protect our children from being a part of. They're going to learn soon enough. But you certainly don't want to introduce them to sin. So young men, young women, Keep your distance from people who want to introduce you to their dainties, to their little tricks that they've learned that make you feel good or make you want to do this or do that. Stay away from them, because they will only lead you into more trouble. So as you think in your heart, so is he. You see something with your eyes, and it goes to your mind. And then if it's interesting, it will go to your heart, and you'll begin to contain it in your heart. And then the next thing you know, you're thinking about it, you're wanting to do it, and you're interested in it and curious about it, and it captivates you. I was reading about all the different addictions that children go through, and young boys can be led into addiction with pornography at a young age because their mind is not ready for that kind of thing, and people introduce them to pornographic stuff, and it sets off an addiction in a young boy's life and may take him a lifetime to be freed of. So, the internet anymore, with all of its filth in it, now I know there's a lot of good things, but there's a lot of bad things, and children should be kept from those things as much as you possibly can. He says he will eat and drink and say to thee, but his heart is not with thee. In other words, he don't really care about you. There are lots of people who will come up and say, hey, you want to be my buddy? But they really don't want to be your buddy. They just want to try and get money from you or get you in trouble or lead you into something evil. So as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. The way you think in your heart, the things that are important to you. Now I'd like you to take your Bible and turn with me to the book of Romans, one of my favorite books, Romans chapter 1. And I'd like to read this, and I'd like you to listen carefully to it. Beginning in verse 18. This is the book of Romans, chapter 1, verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men. And the word hold means to suppress. Who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. So here is a person who is ungodly, they're unrighteous, and they suppress the truth in unrighteousness. They hold it down. You know, they talk about how that the young people of today have had their minds totally corrupted by the professors, whether men or women, who teach in these colleges, who are ungodly, wicked. They cuss like cuss words are going on sale or something, or we're going to lose them. But they curse, they're vile. We had Henry Morris come to Ashland Avenue, and there were two guys that came from UK to try and mess him up. Or, we had a debate, and these two boys came, and they threw their arguments at him, and Dr. Morris just chopped them down like trees. And anyway, when they left, I decided I'd follow them because I wanted to witness to them. And they got out of the church, and they started talking, and it was just blankety, 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 blank. And they were talking about everybody in the church and what they said, and just using the vulgarest words. Listen, people who have that kind of character don't need to be anywhere near our children. Amen. Or our teenagers. Amen. Or our young adults. Because they are fools. They are blinded to the truth, and they hate God's Word, and anything that is good, they're against it. And yet those kind of people are paid big salaries to sit in their chairs and manipulate the minds of our young people in our colleges. I don't know if you ever watch Waters World on Fox News. Jesse Waters got real dark hair, and he's maybe in his middle 20s, late 20s, and he goes out to college campuses and asks these college students just basic questions. You know, that they talk about how they're so up to date on all their views, and it is absurd to hear the answers. They'll ask them, who's the vice president? Who's the president? They'll ask them about something happening. They don't know a thing about it. All they know is they hate Trump. That's all they know. We hate Trump. Do you realize that our country has never been as well off and blessed financially? No man that has been president has done what he's done in the time that he's been there, and the whole time the Democrats have said we're going to impeach him. And that's what they've done for the last 3 years. Anything that's good, I'll tell you this, and I'm not ashamed of this, I am for America. Amen. And I believe we ought to put our country first. If we don't, who will? We've been robbed blind by the Chinese, by the Russians, by different countries for years. And we've now got a president who will stand up and fight for our country. And you got a bunch of people that all they do is hate. Now, I know Donald Trump is not a perfect man. I know he says a lot of things I don't like. I know that he's done things in the past that are not good. But none of us are perfect. A woman texted me last night and was talking about Trump and how bad he was and all that. And I said, lady, do you remember the king, the first king of Israel named Samuel? And you remember the kings who followed him, David and Solomon? I said, do you ever read the Bible and check out about some of the things they did? Look at David. He was a murderer. He was an adulterer. But God said he was a man after my own heart. Look at Solomon. Solomon's life turned into some terrible things, but he was God's man. I believe that hate is not the way we should live our lives. And just because we hate a person and determine that we're going to do everything we can to stop that person just shows that we're led by hatred instead of love. The Bible tells us here in verse 19, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has showed it unto them. For the invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen. Just walk out tonight. Look at the moon. Look at the stars. Tell me who made that. Where did it come from? You think it just happened by accident? I got a lot of land in Florida I can buy and sell you, a lot of swamp water land. If you believe that kind of junk, if you believe that a man evolved from some lower form of life into the higher form that we are today, that defies the laws of first and second thermodynamics. It just won't work. This lower form does not become this higher form. But yet, we've got people that deny. Just walk out there and look at that moon shining bright. Look at those stars in the sky as they twinkle. And you see all the glory of that, and then you attribute it to man. That man made it. Man didn't make it. God did. The fool has said in his heart there's no God. And the deeper they go, the deeper mess they get in. What do we keep in our memory about other people? Our memory has been described as a diary that we carry about every day with us. Lots of people have told me about different experiences in their life, and maybe just one thing has dominated their whole life because they can't get it out of their memory. Some people were mistreated by their parents, and because of that, they have this hatred inside them, and no matter what you say, you can't change it. I love my mom and dad, and I forgive them of anything they ever did against me. They weren't Christians. They didn't know the Lord. But I have no hatred toward my parents. None toward my grandparents. I love them. I adore them. I love my wife. I adore her. My family, I love them. I don't want memories of my past, of bad things, to influence the good things that I could have in my life as I serve God. Amen. And so Paul tells us, because that, verse 21, when they knew God, they glorified Him not as God, neither was thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. This is in the singular. As to the rest of the verse, their foolish heart. You know, when you're little and maybe you're laying awake at night, you look out the window and you see the moon and the stars, and for just a moment, it's like, you know, it dawns on you that, who made that? I remember when I was 5 or 6 years old looking at the moon and the stars, and I thought, now, how did that get here? It couldn't have happened by accident. There had to be a force that made this. Now, right in that moment, I didn't get saved. But in that moment, it came to my mind clearly that God had made this. I didn't understand it, but I knew that God had made it. It's been said, blessed is the life that does not collect and hoard resentment. I've seen people who've had problems in their life and they can't seem to get over it, and then we go into counseling, and after about maybe 2 or 3 counseling sessions, we uncover the problem. And I wouldn't go into them because some of them you may know, but we go and get into the problem, and that problem overrides everything because it's affecting them mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And because this happened in their life when they were a child, it's put a cloud over their whole existence. And the only way to get out of that is to find forgiveness for themselves and then to grant forgiveness to whoever mistreated them. Listen, you can hold a grudge and have hatred in your heart the rest of your life, but it will not heal you. The only way you will start to heal is to forgive the people who have hurt you. You pray for them and you genuinely love them even though they have done you horribly wrong. You'll say, well, Pastor, that's impossible. It is impossible in the flesh, but with God, it's not. And you have to do that. I was abused. I had lots of things in my life where I was mistreated. And I could easily put up a wall and say, well, I can't talk, or I can't be a pastor, or I can't help others because this happened to me. But I rather use it as an example in my life so that I can be a greater help. I've been where you are. I know what it's like. But yet, I know what it's like to forgive and to love. Because that when they knew God, they glorified Him not as God. Romans 12:2 says that we're not to be conformed to this world, but we're to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. Now just think about that for a minute. We're not to be conformed to the ways of this world. Don't be conformed. That word conformed means that the ways of the world impact your life. Most people, they'll watch TV and something happens and they'll say, "Oh my," because that's the language of the world. The child of God don't say that because they're aware that they're taking the name of God in vain. Lots of things that our world does that they want to make it acceptable to us, but we're not to be conformed to this world, but to be transformed. Just like a butterfly, when it's in the stage of a caterpillar and it gets up in a tree and it rolls itself a covering, and after a period of time the caterpillar comes out and it's no longer a caterpillar, it's a butterfly. It's transformed. And so it is with us. The world floods our minds with all these negative and bad things, but God puts in the good things and we are transformed like the butterfly. Philippians 4:8 tells us the things that we are to meditate on. And we're to have a selective memory of the good things and forget the bad things. If there be anything of good report, if there be anything that's honest, lovely, and he goes on and lists a whole number of things, and then at the close of that, then he says, think on these things. And it's in the imperative. We're commanded to do this. Don't think on the bad stuff. Don't think about when you drove that nail through your foot accidentally, or you fell and cut your arm, or about all the bad examples or things you could. But think on good things. Things that are honest, that are lovely, that are of good report. And we're commanded to think on that. You know, I used to play golf quite a bit. I started when I was 27. And I played for maybe 14 years till my back got where I couldn't play. And for those of you that may have never played it or have played it, you know golf is a discouraging game. It's one of the most difficult games. And you think, this time, I'm going to play par. And you start out and you've got a 4 and a 3 and you maybe have a birdie and you think, man, I'm going to shoot under par today. And then you hit number 13 and you get a snowman, which is an 8. And then you turn around, number 14, and get a 10. And then your game is just ruined. And I used to play a lot with pastors. So when I'd get down like that, I'd just start saying, thank God I'm saved. Thank God I'm saved. And just smile just like a raccoon. Thank God I'm saved. I'm glad golf doesn't determine what my life's going to be. I'm not going to let it get me down. It's just a game. And Brother Sexton used to say, Brother Tony, you always say that. You always say that. I said, well, brother, I got to get this junk out of my brain and get something good in there. Think on good things. Things that are lovely. Things that are of good report. So many times people have marital problems. I believe it was, can't think of his name. He said, Warren Wiersbe, he said, the problem with many marriages is that the couples want to get historical with each other. And what he means, they want to bring up the past. They want to dredge up, things that they put behind them. The only way that you can go forward in your marriage or in a relationship is you have to learn to forgive. And you don't dredge up those old things when something happens. You don't use that as a tool to beat your partner down. You forgive. Because as we think in our heart, so we are.